You're crouched beside a fire that isn't yours in a camp where your name is only spoken with caution. The mammoth lies half-gutted behind you, not by you, and the fat-rich heart is already gone. Eyes are watching, not just to see what you take, but how much. You reach for a strip of shoulder meat. Someone shifts behind you. A silence forms, cold and sharp. This isn't dinner, it's politics. Tens of thousands of years ago, one mistake with meat, taking too much, giving too little, sharing with the wrong face, could start a blood feud. But do it right, and it could forge alliances, calm revenge, feed generations, or avert war entirely. You weren't just eating. You were playing a game older than kings. And somehow, that game shaped your brain, your morals, and your civilization. You've never eaten meat the way they did, but their rules still rule you. You tell yourself it's just food, a bite of flesh seared over flame, torn by teeth. Necessary, satisfying, primitive even, but innocent. You chew and you think you're simply feeding your body. But you've already forgot the ancient weight behind that bite. Because for most of human history, meat was never just meat. It was danger disguised as nourishment, a prize wrapped in blood. It was the reason people sang songs and the reason people stopped speaking. It was a debt, a threat, a promise. And once it entered the tribe, it changed everything. You would not have eaten casually. You would have waited, watched, calculated. Because the meat came from somewhere, a kill, and kills come with consequences. Imagine yourself not now, but then tens of thousands of years before memory. You are lean, hungry, and alert. Your world is colder, quieter, and ruled not by laws but by hunger. You wake each day unsure if you'll eat. And if you do, it won't be from a market or a meal plan. It'll be because someone, maybe you, risked their life to bring back a chunk of warm, wet, heavy muscle. And if they did, they'll want something for it. In this world, calories are not casual. They are currency. But not all calories are equal. Berries fill your belly but leave your body cold. Tubers are slow fuel. Insects a compromise. But meat is magic. Dense. Fat-laced. Alive with what your body truly needs. It feeds your brain, heals your wounds, fuels your next chase. And it is rare, staggeringly rare. Because hunting is a gamble. A hunt means hours, sometimes days of stalking, tracking, and sprinting through pain. One wrong step and the prey escapes. One more and you break something and fall behind. A successful kill doesn't just feed you, it feeds everyone. But a failed hunt, that means shame, hunger, risk, maybe death. So when the kill happens, when the spear sinks deep and the beast falls, the celebration is short-lived. Because now comes the hard part. Now comes the sharing. And that's where the real danger begins. You see, meat doesn't just attract wolves and vultures. It draws people, dozens of them, from neighboring bands, from distant camps, from the shadows. Some helped. Others only watched. Some claim they deserve a cut. Others argue they own it all. The mammoth isn't just meat. It's a mirror reflecting every alliance, every rivalry, every fragile agreement. Who gets the liver? Who gets the marrow? Who carries the ribs home for the children? These aren't small choices. These are moves on a social chessboard. If you give too much to one cousin, another feels insulted. If you keep the fattiest cut, someone might wait until nightfall to take it, or worse, take something else. In this world, sharing is strategy. And it's not always noble. Sometimes the strongest hoard. Sometimes the clever manipulate. Sometimes the old guilt the young with stories of starving winters. And sometimes someone gets nothing. Someone is left out, left hungry. And that memory hardens like bone. Because in a world without wealth, meat is wealth. It's the only thing you can't fake. And it does something to your brain. Anthropologists and neuroscientists now believe that meat and the need to share it shape the evolution of your mind. Not tools, not fire, not language, but the social complexity around a dead animal. Meat forced cooperation, sharpened memory, drove gossip. It wasn't enough to be strong. You had to read minds. Who's envious? Who's grateful? Who's plotting? You had to anticipate feelings before they became actions. And your body knew it too. Because when you eat meat, especially after starvation, your brain releases dopamine, endorphins, oxytocin. A biochemical reward not just for the taste, but for the social victory it represents. Sharing meat triggers social bonding, like a chemical handshake between giver and receiver, a promise of future return, a subtle threat if broken. But not all sharing was equal. Some learned to give strategically, offering the best cut to the loudest complainer to silence him, the fattiest piece to the most respected elder to gain favor, the scraps to the child of a potential mate. Every slice carried a message. Every bite had meaning. And over time, these messages solidified into ritual. And rituals into rules. You think rules are written things, but you'd be wrong. These were lived rules, felt, passed through glances, silences, refusals. You learned them the hard way through shame, through isolation, through watching your share shrink after a wrong word. You didn't read the code, you were shaped by it. This is why early humans developed such large prefrontal cortices, not to hunt better, but to manage sharing, to balance fairness with favoritism, to remember who owed who, to lie gently, to forgive when politically useful, to punish quietly. All over an animal carcass. This is what meat meant. Not survival society. Because the moment you put meat into a circle of humans, you ignite a storm of invisible forces, status, envy, obligation, power. You turn a kill into a negotiation table, a fire pit into a courtroom, a meal into a message. And those messages echo into today. You still feel it. In boardrooms, in family dinners, in office birthday cakes, you still signal with food, still read status from servings, still decide who sits where. You no longer need to fight over marrow, but the instincts haven't gone away. They've just put on better clothes. And yet back then, none of this was optional. Because if you failed to navigate the meat, you didn't just go hungry. You made enemies. And those enemies didn't write bad Yelp reviews. They waited until you slept. This is where the real story begins, not with the hunt, not with the kill, but with the carving. You feel it before you see it, a thrum in your chest, in the ground, in the air. The kind of sound that makes birds rise and bones tighten. The kind that warns you, something is coming, and it's bigger than you can imagine. You crouch low, your breath clouding in the frozen air, heart hammering with a rhythm older than language. The wind carries the scent of musk and dirt and blood, not fresh, but ancient, embedded in the tundra. And then it comes into view. The mammoth, a mountain of life, 12 feet tall at the shoulder, 10 tons of heat and muscle and bone, a walking fortress armored in fur. You've seen them before from a distance. You've tracked their paths, followed their droppings, studied the crushed earth where their feet pressed history into the soil. But this is the day it ends. This is the day it falls. But not yet. Because the beast doesn't fall easy. It never does. You are not alone. You are one of a dozen, maybe more, each with a role, each with something to prove. Some of you circle wide with torches, others wait in the low shrubs with spears carved from wood and stone. You hold your breath, not just from fear but from calculation. The angle, the slope of the land, the wind, the look in the mammoth's eyes, all of it matters. One mistake and it doesn't fall. You do. You don't think about meat now. Not marrow, not fat. You think about death. Because this is not hunting the way you imagine it now. This is choreography under threat of extinction. The mammoth must be provoked, driven, cornered. You scream and strike and set fires. You rely on the oldest tactic your species ever invented, panic. Not yours, theirs. And when the panic hits, when the beast charges through smoke and flame, you strike. Spears fly. One misses, another hits but glances off bone. Then a cry, not the mammoth's but a man, a leg shattered by a swipe of the trunk. The mammoth rages, bleeding but alive. Its breath steams like a furnace, its eyes wild, its hooves cracking ice as it turns to kill again. You've seen this before. Mammoths don't fall cleanly. They don't die with dignity. They go down thrashing, screaming, taking with them whatever they can. And you can only hope it's not you. But then the moment changes. Another spear, this one deeper, then another and another. The weight of blood slows the beast. Its legs tremble. Its roars weaken. It sways once, twice, and crashes to the ground with a sound so final the earth feels changed. You did it. But you don't cheer. Not yet. The hunt is over, but the danger is. Because now comes the part you can't control, the story. The story of who did what, who threw first, who risked the most, who deserves the glory and who just watched. You look around, already sensing the quiet recalculations. The man with the broken leg will say he lured the beast. The boy with the missed throw will claim his aim was to distract. The old woman who stayed behind to bless the weapons will say her magic turned the tide. And none of them are entirely wrong. Because in the Paleolithic world, a kill this rare, this enormous, isn't just about survival. It's about status, reputation, leverage. You'll be eating this mammoth for weeks. That means bargaining for shares. That means telling the right version of events. That means building the myth in your favor fast. But before the stories start, there is silence. Because the kill, no matter how many you've seen, is sacred. You gather. The smell of blood is sharp now, intoxicating. Some weep, others stare. Someone kneels beside the head, pressing a hand to the massive tusk, whispering something low. A thank you, maybe, or an apology. There are rituals even now. You don't always know why. Some say it's to honor the beast's spirit, to keep it from haunting your dreams. Others say it's to warn the next hunt, to let the mammoths know you show respect. Whatever the reason, you follow. Because not following means suspicion. And suspicion in this world is as deadly as frostbite. You light a small fire, burn a tuft of hair, offer the first drop of blood to the snow. This is not religion the way you understand it now. It's older than that. It's survival dressed in meaning. A psychological defense against the guilt of killing something so massive, so ancient, so alive. But the guilt fades because the hunger rises. Now comes the skinning, the carving, the distribution. But not by chance. The mammoth is a map of value. Some parts are meat, others are memory. The heart, the tongue, the liver, these go to the ones who bled first. The fat pads to the elders, the pregnant, the wounded. The hide to the fire keepers. The bones for tools or drums or gifts. But every choice matters, every cut watched. If you take more than they think you deserve, you won't hear it today, but you'll hear it later. When your child is sick and no one brings medicine. When you trip in the ice and no one pulls you up. Memory is currency. Generosity is politics. And this moment is your campaign. You might not throw another spear this season, maybe not even this year. A kill like this is that rare. In some years, it doesn't happen at all. You've known winters where the only meat you tasted came from a half-rotten hair or from marrow cracked out of year-old bones. But now you have weeks of sustenance, weeks of warmth, weeks of leverage. And yet that doesn't mean peace. Because what you did today made you visible. Your name is being spoken not just in praise but in comparison. Every gain is a potential threat. Every hero makes someone feel smaller. And in a clan this tightly wound, attention is both a blessing and a warning. The mammoth fell, but the ripples have just begun. And somewhere in the darkening sky, you can already feel the tension thickening, not from nature, but from within. Because the real test of the kill isn't what you took from the mammoth. It's what the mammoth took from you. You didn't land the final blow, but you were there. You ran until your lungs burned. You shouted, flanked, scared the beast toward the spears. You kept pace through freezing wind and shifting ice, and when the mammoth fell, your legs were trembling from the chase. So, what now? Do you get a share? You look around, hoping someone saw, but you already know what's happening. The others are speaking in low tones, eyes flicking to the carcass, to one another, then away. A story is being shaped not with lies but with angles, and you're not in control of the angle. This is the kill-owner dilemma, a tension that arises the moment the blood stops flowing. In your world, ownership feels legal, clear, binary, defined. But back here in the Paleolithic, it's a moving target, because no one hunted alone. Hunts were webs of effort, risk, timing, and trust. Everyone played a part, but not all parts are easy to see or easy to remember once the meat is on the ground. Anthropologists have a name for this: ownership ambiguity. It's the invisible fight that begins after the physical one ends. Because the kill is too valuable to leave unclaimed, but too complex to credit neatly. In some bands, the rules are simple on the surface. The person who struck the final blow owns the kill. That seems fair, until it doesn't. What if he only threw because someone else flushed the beast from cover? What if his spear landed because you made the mammoth stumble with a rock to the knee? And what if it was the old woman who crafted that spearhead last month, sharpening it for hours while you were out collecting firewood? So who owns the kill? You quickly learn that in most clans, effort isn't enough. Visibility matters. Witnesses matter. Stories matter. The person who gets the credit isn't always the one who did the most. It's the one whose version of the truth gains traction. And in the Paleolithic world, storytelling is power. After the hunt, when the meat is still warm, people gather not just to carve but to speak. And the words ripple outward like firelight. He says he threw first. She says she guided the beast toward the edge. Another reminds everyone that it was his idea to track the mammoth 3 days earlier. Memory bends, praise floats, doubt creeps. And slowly, the owner of the kill begins to take shape. In some cultures, like among the Inuit, the rule is ceremonial. The hunter who first wounds the animal is the owner regardless of who finishes the job. This creates order, predictability. But even there, people whisper about exaggerations. Was it really his harpoon that struck first? Did anyone actually see? Among the Hadza of Tanzania, the rule shifts again. The one who made the arrow or spear, not necessarily the one who used it, is considered the owner. So a young hunter might make a weapon and lend it to an older, stronger man. If that weapon kills, the meat flows back to the maker. It sounds generous, even democratic. But it's not altruism, it's strategy. By giving your spear to the best hunter, you raise your odds of becoming the kill's owner without risking your own life. And this is where it gets fascinating. Because over time, humans learn that meat ownership isn't about muscle, it's about narrative positioning. You realize that every glance, every grunt, every gesture at the kill site is part of the negotiation. Maybe you don't claim the kill directly, that would be too bold. But you mention how you guided the herd. You describe the moment you thought the mammoth would escape until you ran left, driving it back toward the spears. You remind others subtly that your plan worked. Because the truth is flexible, but meat is not. And when the shares are handed out, the difference between a good story and a forgotten one can be a week of hunger. You might wonder, why didn't they just formalize it? Why not make a clear rule every kill gets divided equally? But the answer is in the tension itself. Ambiguity is not a flaw, it's the point. By leaving ownership open-ended, clans force people to negotiate, to persuade, to maintain relationships. A strict rule leaves no room for social intelligence, but a fuzzy one, that keeps the group agile. It tests charisma, memory, empathy, hierarchy. It ensures that everyone stays engaged, that every kill is more than food. It's a story, a trial, a rehearsal for leadership. But sometimes the ambiguity breaks down. You remember the old man who claimed ownership last winter, said his dream led him to the mammoth path, that he'd guided the hunt with vision, not action. And for a while people respected him, until a younger hunter argued back, too publicly, too forcefully. The clan split quietly, shares became skewed, tensions simmered. And then one night the younger hunter disappeared into the snow. No one said what happened. No one needed to. This is the risk of ownership ambiguity. When the story splits too far from the truth, it frays the fabric of the group. If people feel cheated too often, they stop chasing. If they feel invisible too long, they stop sharing. So the system polices itself, not with laws but with reputation. You learn that meat is rarely denied outright. It's just smaller, slightly late, a piece missing here, a colder cut there. And over time you feel it, not in your stomach but in your standing. Because the clan is always watching, not just how you hunt, but how you talk after the hunt. And in that talk, ownership is born. You didn't throw the final spear, but maybe you still have a chance. If you speak carefully, if you honor the group, if you remind them of what they didn't see and plant the seed of what they wish they had. Because in this world, your share of the mammoth doesn't just depend on your actions. It depends on whether you can make them matter. You don't dare reach for the liver, not yet. It's steaming, slick with blood, still warm from the mammoth's death. It lies in the center of the kill site like a secret, exposed, yet untouched. Everyone sees it. No one speaks of it. And no one, not even the bravest, dares to take it first. Because not all meat is equal. You've learned this not through words but through glances, hesitations, the way someone's hand might hover and then pull back. The rules are unwritten but etched into your bones. And this is one of the most sacred. Some parts are not yours to touch. Muscle meat is for the many. The thick haunches, the shoulders, the neck, that's what you'll eat. That's what fills bellies. It's valuable, sure, necessary, but it's not forbidden. The forbidden parts are different. They're prized, coveted, watched, because within the massive body of a mammoth or a bison or a giant elk lie organs that carry more than nutrients, they carry meaning. The liver, the heart, the brain, the marrow-rich bones. These are not just food, they are status, they are power, and taking them or being offered them is a statement: you matter, you're seen, you are above others. You learned this when you were a child watching from the edges of the group. The elders would gather near the kill, speaking softly. Then the first cut would come, and it was never random. The liver was taken with care, sometimes eaten raw, passed between the few who were allowed. The marrow bones were cracked open with precision. You remember the sound, a wet snap followed by silence, then the quiet slurping of hot, fatty marrow being drawn from bone. It was sacred, intimate, dangerous. Because if the wrong person took the wrong part, even by accident, things could spiral. You've seen it happen. A young man, flush with adrenaline after a successful hunt, once reached for a fat-laced rib before the elders had eaten. He wasn't scolded. No one shouted. But the silence that followed was heavier than any blow. That night he ate alone. The next hunt his name was left off the plan. He was being taught. Because these rules weren't about fairness. They were about containment. Envy is lethal in a small group. It festers, it spreads. In a world where survival depends on trust, jealousy can tear through a band like frostbite through flesh, slow, then sudden. So humans evolved something smarter than equality: ritual. The forbidden parts were part of that. By creating rules around who got what, when, and how, Paleolithic bands created an emotional release valve. Taboos formed to shape desire, to make sure the wrong hungers didn't turn into violence. Among the Inuit, seal liver is so revered that its first bite goes to the hunter who harpooned it, even if he's not the one who retrieved it. Among the Kong, fat-rich organs are given in a strict order and shared publicly, with elaborate explanations of why each person deserves each part. This isn't bureaucracy, it's therapy encoded in meat. And in your world, on this cold plain with a dead mammoth before you, that therapy is playing out again. The old man approaches the carcass. His face is lined with years, his hands shaking, but his eyes still cut through the group like firelight. He says nothing, just gestures. One by one, a few are called forward. You are not among them. You feel your stomach clench, not from hunger but from something deeper, the ancient ache of being outside the circle. But you stay still. Because taking the liver without permission wouldn't just be a mistake, it would be a challenge, a declaration that you reject the order of things, that your hunger matters more than harmony. And in a group this tightly bound, that's a kind of violence. So you wait. Later, maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow, someone will pass you a strip of sinew or a shard of brain wrapped in hide. It will be smaller, colder, but it will come with context, with the understanding that while you are not at the top of the order, you are within it. And for now, that's enough. Because you also know the deeper truth. This system works. It doesn't always feel good. It's not always fair. But it keeps people together. It gives shape to chaos. After the violence of the hunt, after the blood, the fear, the rupture of death, the ritual of division brings the group back to center. You think of all the things this moment prevents. It prevents one man from hoarding the best parts and becoming resented. It prevents a young hunter from rising too fast and destabilizing the group. It prevents hunger from turning to hatred. You begin to see the genius in it. By making certain foods taboo, early humans didn't just assign value, they created reverence. Reverence is a powerful thing. It transforms one into worship. It turns envy into ritual. It allows people to wait because they believe the waiting means something. But not everyone waits. Sometimes someone does reach too early. Someone does take the forbidden part. And when they do, the reaction is swift. Not always violent, but never forgotten. They are watched, quietly excluded. Sometimes they're blamed when the next hunt fails. Sometimes they're sent out to scout alone. Sometimes they just leave. Because the group cannot afford a wild card. And so as you stand there, eyes on the steaming meat, stomach gnawing, you understand something profound. The forbidden parts are not forbidden because of their biology. They're forbidden because of what they guard, the story of the group, the hierarchy, the balance, the illusion that even here in the cold, in the blood, in the raw scramble of survival, there is order. And in this world, order is everything. You do not reach. And in that restraint, you are seen. You're starving, but you're smiling. And not too much, just the right amount. You're careful, because this isn't just meat. This is status, and that makes it dangerous. You dragged back the antelope this morning. It was a clean kill, one arrow, one drop, a perfect strike. And now the camp is pretending it didn't happen. You expected cheers, applause even, but instead the elder squints at the carcass and grunts, looks scrawny. Another shrugs, pokes it with a stick, and mutters, "Hope it doesn't make us sick." A third laughs and says, "Maybe the dogs will want it." And you laugh too, because you're supposed to. That's the protocol, the envy protocol. You don't boast, you don't beam, you play it down. Because to do otherwise, to celebrate too loudly, to enjoy too visibly, would be to provoke something ancient, corrosive, and contagious: envy. In the modern world, envy hides behind layers of etiquette, ambition, Instagram filters. But in the Paleolithic world, envy was not cosmetic. It was an existential threat. It could splinter alliances, collapse hunts, turn friends into ghosts. And so early humans did something astonishing. They didn't try to erase envy. They designed culture around it. You begin to notice how the tribe bends itself into these strange contortions of modesty. No one says, "I fed the group." They say, "It was just luck." They say, "I missed twice before I got it." They say, "I almost died doing it." Even when they're heroes, they pretend to be fools. Anthropologists call it staged humility, a social technology, not weakness, strategy. Because when a group is this interdependent, when every belly is a ledger and every bite can tilt the balance of status, success must be diluted before it's consumed. And you start to see the method in the madness. Among the Kung of the Kalahari, a hunter who returns with a fat eland is immediately mocked. They insult the kill. They call it bony, diseased, worthless. It's not cruelty, it's ritual. The hunter laughs along. If he acts proud, the scorn increases. But if he jokes with them, plays dumb, downplays the hunt, he becomes safe again. The group accepts him. It's called insulting the meat. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The meat is always being insulted before it's praised. Because that's how you cool down the fire of resentment, with shared pretense. You realize this isn't weakness, it's genius. Because unlike dominance hierarchies in other animals, where winners win and losers lose without recourse, humans evolved to live in small, flat groups where blatant dominance was a liability. If you hoarded too much meat or too much credit, others might not confront you. But they'd remember. The next time you needed help, no one would come. So envy suppression became essential. You start to feel how delicate this balance is. The hunt is thrilling, the kill rewarding, the food necessary, but every joy must be masked. You're allowed to succeed, but not too much. You're allowed to be proud, but only in secret. Because the more visibly you rise, the more you risk becoming a target. And targets don't last long in the wild. But envy suppression isn't just jokes and mockery. It's in the distribution, too. You notice how the meat is shared widely, even with those who didn't hunt. A child who stayed in camp gets a choice cut. An old woman receives the fatty marrow. A man who's been sulking for days is handed the liver first. It seems arbitrary, but it's not. It's insurance. By spreading success, the hunter transforms his personal glory into collective memory. The kill becomes ours, not mine. The group rewards him not for the kill itself, but for not lording it over them. That's the real feat. And the hunter knows it. So he doesn't just bring back meat, he brings back a performance. He downplays, he jokes. He says, "It was nothing." He says, "I nearly missed." He lets the group laugh at him because every laugh softens the edge of envy. You begin to realize how layered the performance is. It's not just about suppressing jealousy, it's about teaching others how to succeed safely. Young hunters watch and learn, not just how to stalk game, but how to navigate power. They learn the real lesson that status must be worn like old hide, weathered, patched, and never too bright. And this system works. For thousands of years, it keeps clans functional, keeps ego in check, prevents feuds before they start. But it's not perfect. Sometimes someone breaks the protocol. A new hunter, flush with success, brags too loud. He doesn't laugh when they insult his kill. He puffs up, boasts, talks too long, and you see it, the subtle shift, the cold looks, the stiff backs, the social fabric tightening like a snare. You've seen those stories before. That hunter doesn't last. He's edged out, exiled by silence. No one says it aloud, but you know the truth. He failed to hide his victory, and that made him dangerous. Because the Paleolithic world doesn't punish power, it punishes pride. And so when your next hunt succeeds, you follow the code. You smile, but not too wide. You tell them it was luck. You say the meat is tough, the marrow thin, the heart shriveled. You let them laugh at you. You laugh louder. And later, when they hand you the best part, not because you asked, but because you didn't, you take it with humility. Because in this world, meat is never just meat. It's politics. It's perception. It's proof of your ability not just to kill, but to belong. The mammoth is already dead, but the real danger hasn't begun. You stand just outside the kill site, heart pounding. Your hands are bloodied from the butchering, but you dare not wipe them. Not yet, because movement right now can be mistaken for intent, and every gesture, every glance, every cut of meat has consequences. On the far edge of the clearing, another band approaches. Not yours. They walk slowly, deliberately, their feet crunching across the frozen earth in rhythms too steady to be casual. There are no greetings. Not yet. Just silence, punctuated by the steam rising off a kill large enough to feed two groups or divide them forever. You recognize one of the men. His scar runs from jaw to collarbone, a leftover from a dispute seasons ago. A woman was taken. A fire was stolen. The story changes depending on who tells it, but the resentment has remained steady, dormant like coals under ash. Now here you are, together again. And what lies between you is more than a carcass. It's a decision point, a fork in the story, peace or something colder. This is not just meat, it is a test. Because in the Paleolithic world, survival doesn't always depend on what you hunt. Sometimes, it depends on how you share what you've hunted. You see the leader of your band step forward. He carries nothing in his hands. His arms are open, palms facing out. No weapons. It's a signal. We are not afraid, but we are not seeking blood. He nods once toward the other group. A man from their side steps forward in kind. Neither of them speaks. Instead, they look down at the kill. And you realize something, the negotiations are already happening, but not with words, with ritual. You've seen this dance before, though rarely this tense. When two groups meet over food, it's not about hunger. It's about memory, about trust, about debts paid and unpaid. In this world, a shared kill can do what language cannot. It can reset the story, but only if it's done perfectly. Your band's leader reaches for a slab of meat, a thick strip of fat-laced belly. He doesn't cut it cleanly. He leaves it rough, generous, still dripping with blood. He holds it out not directly to the scarred man but to the second youngest in the rival group, a neutral party, a symbol of future generations. That's the first move. It's not just an offering, it's a message. We remember what happened, but we're thinking beyond it. The rival group watches. Then their leader steps forward, receives the meat without speaking. His eyes flicker not to the man who offered it but to you. Then he turns, walks back to his band and tears the meat in half. One half is given to his own. The other half, astonishingly, is brought back. He lays it beside the mammoth's open belly, a gesture of mirrored generosity. Not just acceptance, reciprocity. And just like that, the ice begins to crack. You've been told stories of when this kind of moment fails, when a cut is made too greedily, when the best parts are hoarded, when old wounds are reopened by the way a knife moves through fat. One wrong portion can feel like a reminder. We still don't see you as equal. And equality in this moment is everything. Because in the deep past, alliances weren't written in treaties. They were tasted. They were chewed over fires, sealed in marrow, remembered in the distribution of sinew and fat. To give meat was to say, we see your children. We want you to survive. This was how war was prevented, not through dominance, but through deliberate generosity. You watch the scene unfold with quiet awe. The cuts are now being made together, one man from each band. The first cuts, the fat-laced ones, the ones with heat still trapped inside, are passed not to the leaders but to the elders. A signal that tradition still binds you, that wisdom is above vengeance. Later, the rib bones are split. The marrow is passed out carefully, one shard at a time. Each person eats in silence, but you feel the collective breath, long and low, settle across the clearing like fog lifting from the plains. For a moment you feel the weight lift, the danger passing. But you know it could return in an instant. Because even now, even when the meat is shared evenly, the memory of old violence lingers just beneath the surface. One raised voice, one misjudged laugh, one slight imbalance in portions. It's all it would take to turn this peace ritual into a spark. But that's what makes it sacred. Because in a world where power is physical and survival is daily, restraint is a kind of heroism. And sharing meat, honestly, fairly, across divisions, is the most radical thing you can do. It's not utopia. There are still hard feelings, still old debts. But this moment, this carcass becomes a kind of pause button on history. You've all eaten the same beast. It's inside you now, flowing through your blood, binding you. And maybe that's why humans survived, while other predators didn't. Because you didn't just learn to hunt together, you learned to forgive through food. You turned calories into politics, meat into messages, and sharing into strategy. As the fires rise and the last scraps are passed out, you sit among those you once called rivals. You eat quietly, not smiling, not forgetting, but choosing for one more day not to let the past own the future. Because in this world, peace isn't declared, it's offered, one bite at a time. And tomorrow, if another beast falls or another conflict threatens to rise, you'll remember this moment. The way it felt to risk trust, the way meat, divided carefully, became something more than food. It became proof that even in an age of stone and blood, you knew how to keep the peace alive. You sit at the fire and you think you're just warming your hands, but you're not. You're declaring allegiance. You're signaling intent. You're accepting or denying power. Because around this fire, everything means something. Every seat, every glance, every bite. The flames flicker, casting long shadows that dance across faces both familiar and dangerous. Behind you is darkness. In front of you, the circle. It seems casual. A loose ring of bodies, quiet conversation, roasted meat passed hand to hand. But the closer you look, the more you feel it. This is not just a fire. This is a court. A Paleolithic parliament. And you're sitting inside it. You notice how the most dominant hunter doesn't sit in the center, not quite. That would be too obvious, too easy to challenge. Instead, he positions himself at a precise angle to the flames, just off the main line of sight, where he can speak without shouting and watch without starring. His closest allies flank him, forming a kind of silent shield. Across the fire, the elder woman, old enough to remember deaths no one else dares mention, occupies the memory seat. She doesn't speak often, but when she does, voices fall silent. Her presence is a reminder. The past sits with us always. You're somewhere in between. Not at the edge, not near the heart. Just close enough to be invited into the conversation, but not close enough to steer it. And that's exactly what's being measured, not your voice, but your proximity. Because at the Paleolithic fire, where you sit is who you are. Anthropologists studying surviving hunter-gatherer groups have long noted this invisible architecture. Among the Hadza, the San, the Ache, fires are not just sources of heat, they're structures of meaning. Proximity to the hearth reflects status, trust, and obligation. Sit too close without permission, and it's an intrusion. Sit too far back, and you signal withdrawal or worse, suspicion. And then there's the food. The meat isn't passed randomly. It flows in loops, in patterns that seem informal until you feel their gravity. A piece is passed to the left, to the cousin of a man who once shared a kill with you in a desperate winter. Another goes right, towards someone you argued with yesterday, but who now receives a sliver of liver, rich and warm. It's an offering or a peace treaty. And the act of passing it hand to hand, never thrown, never flung, is a kind of unspoken language. You're not just giving nutrition, you're giving recognition. You start to see the rules. If someone hands you meat and you eat it without comment, it means trust. If you pause before eating, nod, say nothing, that's gratitude. If you touch it, then pass it onward without biting, that's rejection. Or worse, warning. You watch someone on the outer ring do exactly that. A piece of heart passed, received, then turned away. The mood dips almost imperceptibly. Someone coughs. Someone else changes the subject, but everyone saw it. Everyone felt it. Later, you'll learn that those two haven't spoken since a trade dispute at the river. The meat remembered what words forgot. And so does the fire. Because the fire isn't just a tool, it's a medium, a stage. The flames draw eyes, and what people see they remember. Every gesture, who serves whom, who laughs too loudly, who breaks silence first, is absorbed into collective memory. That's the terrifying and beautiful part of Paleolithic life. Nothing is forgotten. The fire ring is where stories are told, yes, but also where debts are tallied, where alliances are strengthened and sometimes dissolved, where the invisible economy of favor and forgiveness is traded moment by moment. And you sitting here are learning how to play that game. You learn when to speak and, more importantly, when not to. You learn how to hand over meat with your eyes low so it feels like respect, not pity. You learn which silences are tense and which ones are sacred. You see how leadership isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the man who finishes eating last, making sure the weakest eat first. Sometimes it's the woman who remembers an old joke at just the right moment and says it with perfect timing to break the tension. These are the people whose names don't always lead the hunt, but they sit closer to the fire, and that means something. In time, you'll sit a little closer too, but only if you listen. Because around this fire, listening is currency. It's how you learn who's angry, who's grieving, who's testing the boundaries of belonging. You can't just ask. That would be direct, dangerous. Instead, you watch the flow of food, of glances, of words half spoken and then swallowed. The fire tells you everything, and then it tells nothing. Because just when you think you understand the rules, they change. Someone breaks pattern. A new guest is welcomed. A child blurts something inappropriate and laughter erupts, not scorn but forgiveness. The circle adjusts, reshapes. Like flame itself, this structure is alive. And now you understand. You came to the fire for warmth, but what it gives is meaning. Every night, across thousands of years, circles like this formed. In caves, on tundras, in forests under stars. They were never just about cooking. They were about coding, embedding complex social signals into rituals that could be passed from generation to generation without ever needing to be explained. You feel that code moving through you now, as you offer a piece of meat to the man on your left. He takes it, nods once and says nothing. Which here is everything. Because in this world, survival doesn't come from speaking loudest or eating first. It comes from understanding how the fire speaks back. And if you listen closely, if you watch not just the hands but the silences between them, you'll learn the oldest truth of all. That community isn't built in words. It's built in heat, hunger, and the slow, deliberate passing of meat through firelight. You think of the kill as the end of the hunt, but in truth, it's only the beginning of control. Because once the spears are dropped and the carcass is stripped, something quieter begins to unfold. A different kind of power takes hold. Not the flash of the chase or the triumph of the strike, but the slow, deliberate shaping of who gets what, and when, and why. And this power, it often rests in the hands of women. You sit inside the camp now where the fire's not for storytelling but for distribution. The hunters are back. The adrenaline has faded. The meat has cooled. This is the moment the true economy begins, the one not written in blood but in memory. You see her, an elder, hunched but watchful, unwrapping a piece of dried meat from an animal killed 3 moons ago. It's still good, still useful. She doesn't eat it. She places it carefully near the sleeping mat of a girl who's recently come of age. No one comments, but everyone sees. It's not just generosity, it's not just survival, it's signaling. Because among the ancient clans, meat didn't only nourish bodies, it nourished social structure. And inside the camp, where egos cool and alliances shift, women became the architects of that structure. They controlled the flow. Not because they killed, though many of them did in certain contexts, but because they knew what a leftover could do. A haunch given days later, unexpectedly, to someone who had nothing to do with the hunt, that could forge loyalty. A bone with marrow left intact, gifted to a mother with a sick child, that could restore a favor or erase a slight. They didn't call it diplomacy, but it was. This was the hidden choreography of Paleolithic life, and you begin to see how vital it was. When calories are scarce, every bite carries weight, and women learned over tens of thousands of years how to wield that weight without open confrontation, through softness, through timing, through silence and subtlety. They knew that feeding the wrong person too well could spark jealousy, that neglecting a rival could create an enemy. So they walked the line, nourishing, appeasing, testing. Every fire-cooked meal was a quiet referendum on status, affection, and worth. And it didn't end with food. Because meat was reproductive currency, too. You notice the patterns now. The young men with the most frequent kills aren't always the most celebrated. Some are loud, boastful, eager to flash their dominance. But they sit alone more often than not. The ones who rise, the ones who are whispered about, are those who give. And often, it's women who shape that narrative. They talk, around the fire, while skin is scraped or fibers are twisted. They remember who gave their children the tender strips. They joke about the man who saved the liver for himself, and the one who pretended the best part had been eaten by wolves. These stories move through the camp like wind through grass, invisible but felt. And in time, these stories influence everything: reputation, desirability, mating choices. Because a man who shares meat wisely is seen not just as generous, but as strategic, as someone who understands balance, who can provide not only food but stability. In a world where death can come from cold, disease, or fractured alliances, that's the trait that matters most. You start to realize that mating in the Paleolithic wasn't just about strength. It wasn't even about beauty, not in the way you think of it. It was about trustworthiness under stress, and women had a front row seat to that test every time a kill came into camp. They watched who hoarded, who bluffed, who offered the choicest cuts, and who always waited for someone else to go first. And they remembered. Because they had to. The future of their children depended on it. And there's another layer, one you hadn't noticed before. The way older women move among the younger ones. Not bossy, not loud, but present, teaching without teaching, showing how to portion leftovers, how to wrap organ meat in grasses to preserve it, how to send a subtle message with a dried sinew snack dropped at someone's feet. This is the transmission of influence. And it's influence that doesn't always show up in bones or artifacts, but it's there, woven into the very structure of how humans survived. You think again about the camp hierarchy and realize it's not a pyramid, it's a web. And in that web, women were the ones holding the strands. They didn't need to dominate the hunt, to dominate the narrative, because they curated the memory of the hunt. And they decided, with deliberate grace, who would benefit and who would be left waiting. As you sit and watch the meat pass from hand to hand, you see a young woman break a strip in two and hand the larger half to an elder who hasn't spoken all day. It's small, almost unnoticeable, but it's a move, a signal, a future favor. And the elder receives it without a word, but with a nod. That nod will echo, not tonight but later, when something is needed, when alliances are redrawn, when trust is tested. Because in this world, where famine always whispers and tension never sleeps, it is not just the strong who endure. It is the wise, the measured, the ones who know that meat, like power, must flow, and that how it flows determines whether your people thrive or fracture. And so you understand, finally, what's been hidden in plain sight. That women didn't just share meat. They shaped civilization with it. You think you're just cutting meat, but something deeper is happening, not in your hands, but in your brain. You grip the flint blade. The hide is open. Steam rises from warm flesh into cold air, and your heart is racing. But not from fear. It's something else, something older. You're not just harvesting food, you're engaging in a ritual of dopamine and trust, of status and strategy. And your body knows it before your mind does. Because inside your skull, neurons are lighting up like fireflies. The moment you share that first piece, not just tear it off, but extend it, pass it, offer it, your brain floods with oxytocin, the bonding chemical, the same molecule that rushes through new mothers, through lovers, through animals who nuzzle each other for comfort. And now it's pouring through you, all because you gave. You didn't plan this, you didn't calculate it, but evolution did. Somewhere back in the Pleistocene, a strange mutation was selected for, the kind of mind that feels good when others eat, not just when you eat, but when someone else does because of you. And not just anyone, especially the right people, kin, allies, potential mates, valuable members of your group. Because the truth is, humans never evolved to share out of moral purity. Sharing wasn't a commandment. It was a calculation, a feeling that rewarded the smartest long-term play. Distribute now, benefit later. That's the butcher's psychology. And it begins the moment you start cutting. Muscle isn't just tissue, it's currency. And with each slice, your brain is doing something subtle, mapping value, measuring risk, calculating impressions. Who's watching? Who will remember this? What alliances are being built or broken as the marrow is divided? Even children, long before they understand language, mimic this logic. Studies show that toddlers will preferentially give food to those who have shared with them before, not because they were taught, because their brains expect reciprocity. The circuits light up when sharing occurs and go dark when it doesn't. And when someone withholds, that lights up something else entirely. You've seen it. The twitch in the jaw when someone takes more than their share. The stiff silence when a prized cut never makes it down the line. What you're feeling isn't just anger, it's a neural response. The anterior cingulate cortex, the part of your brain that tracks fairness and emotional pain, is sounding an internal alarm. Because stinginess isn't just rude, it's dangerous. It signals unreliability. And in small groups, unreliability gets you killed. So nature made it painful. You learn this fast, sitting around that fire. A generous butcher gets nods, laughs, protection. A selfish one, even if strong, starts to lose something subtler. People stop laughing at his jokes. They wait a little longer to pass him food. His stories carry less weight. It's not overt. It doesn't need to be. That's the genius of evolution. It built a system where generosity feels good and selfishness feels risky, long before logic enters the room. And the effect isn't just social, it's internal. Your brain actually rewards anticipation of reciprocity. Neuroimaging shows that when people expect future return from a gift, even unconsciously, reward centers activate. Not because they've gained anything yet, but because they might. That potential is enough. And so every time you offer meat, your brain is weighing variables you can't name. Kinship, memory, threat, debt, and future gain. You're not giving, you're investing. But the beauty of this psychology is that it doesn't feel like economics. It feels like emotion. And that's what makes it work. Because once meat is passed, the logic disappears into feeling. The person who receives it experiences a mirrored chemical flood, gratitude, bonding, oxytocin. They remember the gesture, even if they forget the cut. And so a loop is formed, a feedback cycle, not written in laws but carved into limbic systems. This is why the butcher matters. Not just because they divide flesh, but because they manage affect, the emotional terrain of the group. With every cut, they influence not just fullness but feeling, not just calories but cohesion. And you begin to see how delicately balanced it all is. If a butcher gives too much, they may seem weak, exploitable. If they hold back, they may seem greedy, untrustworthy. But if they cut with skill, offering not just meat but meaning, they become something rare, a stabilizer of group chemistry. You feel this as you pass a strip of liver to someone who was angry at you yesterday. They pause, they take it, they chew slowly. And in that chew, something softens. You didn't need to apologize. The meat did it for you. Through hormones, through history, through the silent, shared understanding that survival doesn't happen through domination. It happens through distribution. And so now when you cut differently. You watch, you feel, you anticipate. You start to sense the shape of the group's mood, who's tense, who's tired, who needs the first bite tonight not because they earned it, but because they need it. And when you get it right, when the sharing flows and the group settles, and the laughter begins to rise again, your brain rewards you with something even deeper than dopamine. It gives you belonging. And in a world this wild, That's the only thing safer than meat. You think memory is for stories, for names, faces, the shapes of rivers and stars. But long before memory held myths, it held something colder, something sharper. It held debt. Because when food is life and life is fragile, the mind must track not just events but obligations. And nothing binds more tightly than meat. You remember the moment vividly. The day your belly burned empty and the wind howled through the ribs of the camp, when there was nothing left but bone broth thinned with snow and quiet hunger. Then a hand, not family, not a close friend, just a man who had killed last week and still had fat drying in his pouch. He gave you a strip, dried, salted, liver-heavy. It wasn't much, but it filled the place in your gut where fear had started to bloom. You never forgot. Because meat, when you're starving, carves itself into memory. And memory in the Paleolithic world wasn't sentimental, it was strategic. Your brain evolved to remember who gave when it mattered, not in a vague, feel-good way, in exact detail, with faces, context, status, and timing. That piece of meat was recorded, stamped into the social ledger you carry invisibly in your mind. And if you didn't return the gesture, that was remembered too. Because in a world without coins or contracts, reputation is the only currency that compounds. And meat, so immediate, so tangible, became one of its most binding denominations. You start to realize every gift of food is an unspoken transaction, not in the sense of a trade, but in the sense of a test. Will this gesture echo? Will it be seen, logged, someday answered? The brain thinks so. Anthropologists call it social accounting, but your mind doesn't use terms. It uses feelings. The quiet warmth of gratitude, the spike of guilt, the growing weight of obligation, the cold sting of betrayal when meat once given is never acknowledged, not with words, not with return, not even with a glance. And it works both ways. Because the person who gave you that meat, they remember too. Not out of pride, out of necessity, because giving food is not just generous, it's risky. Every calorie shared is a calorie you no longer own. In an uncertain world, that's an investment in someone else's future. And if that future comes, and you're the one holding your ribs in, what happens when they look away? It's not just forgetting. It's theft. A theft of survival. A theft of relationship. A theft of the balance that holds the camp together. That's why forgetfulness in the Paleolithic mind wasn't benign. It was suspicious, and often unforgivable. You sit at a fire now and you hear it in the stories, not epic tales but quiet ones. Someone whispers about a man who once took meat during a famine but never shared when he hunted again. No one says he's evil. No one says he's doomed. But his name doesn't come up as often. He sits slightly farther from the fire. Fewer eyes meet his when he speaks. This is memory at work, not just individual but collective. Because these are not isolated minds, they are networked. And the network runs on meat and memory. You begin to see how trust systems emerge, not from law but from layers of remembered exchange. She gave when she didn't have to. He hoarded when others were sick. That family always saves scraps for the old. That hunter cuts the best parts for his brothers, but never for those outside his circle. Over time, these memories calcify into social expectations, and expectations become norms. This is how society forms, long before walls or writing, not through rules but through recollection, through the way every act of sharing or refusal leaves a trace. Even now, thousands of years later, your brain reacts to generosity with a strange sense of balance. Someone buys you lunch. You instinctively want to return the favor. Someone ignores your hunger, and a tiny wall forms between you, quiet but real. You think you're modern, but your nervous system is still Paleolithic. You still remember meat debts. The only difference is the form they take. Back at the fire, an elder tells a half-joke. She laughs about a man who once took the biggest bone and claimed it was hollow. Everyone chuckles, but you feel the undercurrent. That story has weight. It's repeated not just for humor, but for record, so that no one forgets who once ate too well, too fast, without thinking of others. The group doesn't confront him. They don't need to. He knows the story about him. That's the punishment. Because in a world without prisons, without fines or titles, memory is justice. And meat is the medium through which justice is tested, again and again. You understand now. No gift of meat is ever forgotten. Not when it saved a life. Not when it was hoarded. Not when it was shared out of turn or hidden from someone grieving. Every act, every cut leaves a mark. And those marks form the invisible ledger that decides not only who is trusted, but who is followed when the wind turns sharp, and the game grows scarce, and the clan must decide whose fire is worth walking toward. And so, when you next offer food, even just a strip, you pause. Because you know now, with a bone-deep clarity, you're not just giving calories. You're carving your name into someone else's memory. It begins quietly, not with a fight or a scream or blood in the snow, but with a silence. You're sitting near the edge of the fire circle where the shadows grow longer. The mammoth kill was 2 days ago. Its bones lie stripped under the pale sky, the last scraps drying beside cracked marrow bowls. You expect warmth in the air not from the flames but from the pride of the hunt, from the full bellies, from the sharing. But something feels wrong. There's tension in the way no one speaks to Alk. He's a young man, fast and lucky with a spear, and it was his blow that pierced the mammoth's leg, slowing it just enough for the final rush. Everyone saw it, but it was what he did after that changed everything. You didn't notice at first. No one did. The chaos of butchering a mammoth, it hides many things. The flying blood, the urgent work, the frantic carving to beat rot and predators. But someone saw him. They always do. A glance here, a hasty movement there. The way he took a fatty slab from the liver pile and stuffed it into his pouch before the cut was formally blessed by the elder. And now it spreads. The elder woman with the sun-creased face, the one who usually ladles marrow to the children, she hasn't spoken all morning. Her youngest grandson got a piece of tendon, tough and dry, while Alk's cousin gnawed something richer by far. The others notice. They whisper. Their silence is not absence, it's weaponized. In the Paleolithic world, You don't need swords to draw blood. You just need memory and mouths. The gossip grows in half-sentences, in the way someone avoids sitting near him, in how a song is sung that once was his but now skips his name. No one accuses. Not yet. But accusation isn't necessary when isolation does the work. You begin to understand selfishness in a tightly woven band isn't just frowned upon, it's dangerous. Because every act of hoarding isn't just about food, it's about fear. If someone takes more today, what will they take tomorrow? If they can't restrain themselves in abundance, what will they do in scarcity? That's when the elder speaks. Her voice is soft, but it cuts deeper than bone. She says only this: some meat forgets the fire it came from. No names, no fingers pointed. But Alk stands stiff and pale. This is how exile begins. Not with force, but with drift. His family shifts with him, uncertain, trying to joke it off. They say he earned it, that no one missed anything, that he only took what was already his, but it doesn't land, not anymore. Because in your world, trust is everything. A single breach ripples out like cracks in ice. It wasn't just the piece he took. It was the order he broke. The rules carved not in stone but in tradition, in ritual, in centuries of invisible agreements. The child who got less that night may never say a word, but he will remember. And so will his mother, and her sister, and their cousins. A single insult to fairness doesn't disappear, it compounds. This is why betrayal hurts more than hunger. Because hunger passes, but betrayal lingers. It lives in glances and in laughter that stops when you walk near. In tasks you're no longer asked to join. In silence where there should be stories. You look again at Alk's eyes. There's fear now, not of punishment but of irrelevance. To be ignored in your world is to be half dead already. You need others, for warmth, for food, for future hunts, for meaning. Without them, you're just a body walking across the steppe, waiting for the wolves to smell your solitude. Days pass, and then the stories begin. They say Alk lied about a previous kill, claimed it solo when it was a joint effort. They say he once kept brain meat hidden from an old man. They say he spoke too much of his own skill and not enough of the spirit's. Whether it's true doesn't matter. The story is now stronger than the facts. This is the cost of failed sharing. It doesn't just spark irritation. It corrodes the glue. Because your ancestors didn't survive on raw strength, they survived by knowing they could count on each other. When that knowing breaks, sometimes so does the group. You've seen it happen. A fight breaks out weeks later, not about food, but about a hunting route or sleeping space or something that seems unrelated. But it's not. It's the fracture delayed. And once the blood is drawn, no one remembers how it started, only that it did. Other times, exile comes without conflict, just distance. A family pack drifts east. A fire circle grows smaller, and a young hunter disappears into the snow, believing himself wronged, not realizing how deeply he wounded the trust that once warmed him. You begin to see, generosity was never optional, it was structural, an unspoken architecture that kept human groups from collapsing under the pressure of survival. When it worked, it protected. When it failed, even slightly, it shattered. And once shattered, memory doesn't heal fast. You think back to your own world, the times someone took too much credit or held back in a crisis or forgot who helped them rise. The fracture feels familiar, doesn't it? The coldness, the slow drift, the unsaid. Maybe not much has changed. Because even now, your brain flinches at unfairness. Your chest tightens when trust is broken. Your heart tracks debts of kindness and betrayal like a ledger carved in something deeper than stone. This is the cost of failed sharing. It echoes not just through the body, but through the future. And in the Paleolithic world, that future was always a knife's edge, where trust was the only thing thick enough to shelter you from the next hunger, the next storm, the next silence. You arrive late, but the smell hits you before the firelight does: roasted marrow, charred fat, boiled brain. It's not just a meal, it's a spectacle. The kind of event that makes children whisper and elders raise their eyebrows. You've seen sharing before, quiet, ritual, careful. But this is different. Tonight it's not about hunger, it's about leverage. You spot him, the host, near the heart of the fire where the smoke swirls but never lands. His robe is thick, stitched with sinew from animals only he has killed. He's laughing but too loud, smiling but not with his eyes. He calls people forward with wide gestures, generous, like a man too full to care about consequence. But you know better. Because when someone gives too much, you start to wonder what they're taking. He carves slices of liver with ceremonial blades and places them in others' hands, one by one, not tossing them, placing them, holding eye contact a second too long. He gives a bowl to the elder who once doubted him, dripping with marrow and respect. He calls the young rival by name, invites him to the circle's center, praises his courage, and feeds him a slice too large, too rich, too indebted. This isn't generosity. It's a quiet war. Because the Paleolithic world didn't run on coins or contracts. It ran on memory, obligation, and attention. If someone fed you when you were starving, you owed them. And if someone fed you in public with everyone watching, the debt wasn't just personal. It was political. And this man, he's building a wall of gratitude around himself. One slice at a time. You realize this kind of sharing is nothing like the desperate exchanges between families in famine, or the careful redistribution managed by mothers in the camp. This is theatrical, weaponized, a gift designed to weigh more than it feeds. And if you refuse it, that's worse. Because then you're the one rejecting community, insulting the meat, spitting on the ritual. You can't win. You can't say no without becoming the next outsider. So you nod, you eat, you smile. And now you owe. This tactic is old, older than cities, older than farming. Anthropologists call it competitive feasting. A paradox: the more someone gives, the more power they absorb. In places like the Pacific Northwest, chiefs once gave away mountains of salmon, cedar canoes, and furs, and those who received were bound to them. The more extravagant the gift, the more impossible the repayment. And so the web tightened. The Paleolithic version was simpler, but no less sharp. You remember another story. A woman in the band who, in a time of scarcity, produced meat no one expected. A small deer, perfectly cleaned, brought forward without warning. She offered it to a neighboring clan during a tense season. The leaders couldn't refuse. And now she had something rarer than food, she had leverage. The next hunt, she got the prime spot. The next vote, her brother's idea passed without resistance. It wasn't manipulation. It was strategy. You begin to understand. Generosity wasn't always pure. Sometimes it was a form of social engineering, a way to outmaneuver stronger rivals without lifting a spear. A feast could outfight a fist. A gift could outlast a wound. But the trap works both ways. You see a man near the edge of the circle, lean, suspicious, chewing slow. He took the meat but not the smile. He knows what this is. And tomorrow, when the host needs help to hunt, to argue, to choose a mate, that debt will be called in. And if it isn't paid, then the laughter of tonight becomes the accusation of tomorrow. Because no one forgets a feast, especially not the one that made them kneel. This is the twisted edge of Paleolithic sharing, when food becomes currency and meals become messages. When generosity is a performance and the applause is silence, because everyone understands the cost but no one dares name it. You wonder how often this happened. How many alliances were formed not around a fire of equals, but beneath the shadow of obligation? How many betrayals started with a gift too big to return? And you begin to ask yourself, is it still like this? Is modern giving ever pure? Think of the donation with the name plaque, the favor with a future ask, the invitation with strings hidden in the smile. Some meat still tastes like strings. And yet, some still give without keeping score. That's what makes it so complicated. You turn your eyes back to the fire. The host is telling a story now, loud, heroic, and vaguely familiar. He's not the hero in the tale, not directly, but he controls the rhythm, the punchline, the pause, the laugh. He's shaping the story the way he shaped the feast, slowly, deliberately, with one eye always on the room. And everyone is listening. Because when someone feeds you, they feed your body and your memory. And memory, in your world, decides who rises and who fades into the cold. This is the paradox of Paleolithic power. Not taken by force, but offered with open hands too full to refuse. And behind every gift, a ledger. You crouch in the dust, fingers hovering over the jagged edge of a split femur. It's quiet here. No fires, no chance, no blood, just stone, soil, and time. But the bones speak anyway. They don't whisper, they accuse. Not with words, but with patterns, clean slices, sudden fractures, violent chips, the signature of 1,000 years of hunger and hierarchy pressed into calcium. You didn't witness the kill. You weren't there when the hide peeled back or when the marrow boiled. But the cut marks remain. The bones don't forget. They never do. You trace the groove again. It's precise, repeated, angled just right for a flint blade. Whoever carved it knew exactly what they were doing. Not just how to butcher, but in what order. That matters more than you think. Because in your ancestors' world, cutting wasn't just physical, it was political. The first cut wasn't made by the strongest hand. It was made by the most powerful person. Hierarchy leaves marks, always. Archaeologists call it sequence analysis. The order in which a carcass is dismembered, who gets the tongue, the liver, the thick fat near the kidneys. It's a choreography of status. If a femur is split clean down the center early on, that means the marrow was taken before muscle. That means someone of high rank was present, someone important enough to halt the process, claim the richest fuel, and eat while others still worked. The rest of the bone dispersal tells its own tale. You find scapula fragments 20 meters away, tossed after the best meat was stripped. Someone didn't just eat, they moved. Redistribution in space, and that tells you something else. This wasn't a desperate, scattered feeding frenzy. It was organized, controlled, probably governed by taboo, maybe ritual, maybe fear. You dig deeper. A pelvis cut in an odd place. Not the most efficient slice, but a symbolic one. Not about calories, but about memory. You know that in some hunter-gatherer bands, specific bones were reserved for specific people, or even refused entirely. Some were given to the elderly first, not out of charity, but out of law. In others, young men weren't allowed to touch brain meat until their first kill. The remains don't just show how humans fed each other, they reveal who they believed each other to be. And when those patterns break, that's where the real stories hide. You've seen it before. A site where high-value bones were concentrated in one pit, not shared, not scattered, just stored, hoarded. A different group, a different ethic. Maybe the kill belonged to a smaller elite, or maybe envy had already hollowed out the social core. You can't know the feelings, but you can see the fallout. Because bones don't lie. Teeth marks tell you even more. When you find human teeth on human bone, and you will if you dig deep enough, it challenges every soft idea about sharing. Not every famine ended with peace. Not every rule held. Some bands fractured under the weight of scarcity, and when the meat ran out, the taboo cracked with it. Rituals failed. Hierarchies dissolved. And then, things got quiet. But even then, the bones recorded it. You learned to read them like a language. Clean spiral fractures from fresh marrow extraction. Repeated slicing near tendon-rich joints. Polished knobs from long-handled boiling. You read a story of community or control depending on how far those pieces are carried. If they're spread wide, it means the group sat together, ate together, shared across the circle. If they're clustered, tightly stacked, it hints at gates, barriers, decisions about who got what and why. Sometimes the smallest bones speak the loudest. You hold a child's rib in your palm, tiny, fragile, but scored with a butcher's cut. It wasn't cannibalism, not here. It was a child fed too late. The mark came from reboiling long after death. Maybe they tried to make something sacred of the loss. Maybe it was the last ritual before winter closed its mouth. Even morning leaves marks in the marrow. You step back and breathe. It's strange, isn't it? How the deepest truths, the ones no one wanted to say aloud, are the ones that survived longest. Not the songs, not the names, not the faces, but the bones, the hard record of how we lived together and how we failed. And in those failures, you see a mirror. Because we still cut unfairly, we still hoard, still divide what should be shared. We build systems of consumption around status, not need. The pieces may look different, but the distribution still leaves scars. Some take the liver, others get the scraps. And we still remember who got what. Maybe that's the final truth. The flesh rots, the feast ends, the stories fade. But the bones remain. And they always tell the truth. You crouch beside the fire, and for once you don't reach for the meat. You watch instead as a single fatty strip of liver is set aside untouched, not for the old, not for the children, not for anyone. You feel the tension. Hunger hangs thick in the smoke, but no one moves. Because that piece doesn't belong to the living. Not today. In your world, meat is calories, survival, but in theirs it was never just flesh. It was meaning, obligation, a bridge between this world and something older, darker, something watching. When a sacred cut was laid upon the coals, it wasn't waste. It was insurance. It was memory. It was fear made edible and then burned away. You've seen these moments before. A perfectly good thigh, charred black, never touched. A kidney buried beside the fire, tucked in its own pocket of earth. You might call it superstition, but you'd be missing the point. These weren't accidents. They were declarations. Sacrifice wasn't about loss. It was about balance. Because every kill tilted something out of place. To take a life, even the life of a mammoth, even with a dozen mouths starving, was a moral disturbance. Something owed now, not just to the animal but to the world around it, to the spirits, the ancestors, the invisible ledger that never forgot what you took. So the meat had to be shared with the unseen. And not just any cut, the most precious ones. Fat organs, brains, pieces pulsing with symbolic power. You couldn't just burn bones and call it even. The offering had to cost something. That's what made it real. That's what made the rest of the feast safe. Because if you didn't pay, things went wrong. There were stories of hunts that failed for seasons, of animals that vanished from the landscape, of bobbies born without breath. And always, always, someone remembered the time a chief hoarded the heart, or a woman fed her lover before the fire. Ritual wasn't performance. It was survival disguised as obedience. You've seen the patterns in the bones, too. Certain ribs always missing, scapulas blackened, never butchered, burn layers with no signs of cooking, just placement. These weren't meals. They were messages, some to the dead, some to the gods, some to the land itself. But all of them said the same thing. We remember, we give back. We know this meat isn't ours alone. And it was. You step further back, beyond the flicker of the flames, to where elders whisper songs you don't understand. Songs about a time when meat bled without pain, when animals walked into spears because the world was still in balance. Those songs end with fire, with sacrifice, with the lesson that taking must be answered by giving, or there will be consequences. This is where social law and spiritual belief blur, because removing sacred cuts from circulation didn't just please spirits, it managed people. It soothed envy before it could rise. It turned potential arguments into reverence. You couldn't be angry that someone got the best part if no one did, if the best part went into the flames. And that decision, to burn instead of bite, became the glue that held the group together. Not everyone liked it. You imagine the resentment, the glances, the stomachs tightening at the smell of roasting heart. But they obeyed, because ritual disobedience was worse than hunger. It wasn't just taboo, it was dangerous. It marked you, separated you. And in the Paleolithic world, to be separated was to be doomed. So even when the cold bit hard, even when a child cried out for more, the sacred cut was still taken aside, still buried, still lifted skyward in the silence before dawn, because meat was never just meat. It was memory, morality, myth. And myth could keep people alive, not by magic, but by meaning. You begin to see how belief itself became a kind of survival strategy, a way to encode social harmony in the language of gods and ghosts, a way to turn envy into awe and hunger into obedience. And once you believe, really believe, that some parts of the animal belong to something greater, you no longer question the loss. You honor it. You ritualize it. You teach it to your children. And they do the same. Until one day, thousands of years later, someone uncovers a pit of burned bones and wonders what kind of god demanded so much fat. But you already know. It wasn't a god. It was a group trying to stay together. And the fire, the sacrifice, was their last, best hope of peace. Now you rise from the ashes and walk toward the next question. Because if meat could be used to honor spirits and enforce order, what happened when it became a currency? Something traded, counted, leveraged. That's where we go next. You sit beside the fire, small and silent. The meat is passed, not to you, not yet. You smell it first. The charred fat, the sweetness of cooked marrow. Your stomach tightens. You're hungry, but you wait. Because this is your test. As a child in the Paleolithic world, you learn the rules early, not from lectures, but from hunger, from watching, from what isn't said. No one explains the children's portion, but everyone knows when it's time. And more importantly, when it's not. At first it feels unfair. The best cuts go elsewhere, elders first, then hunters, then mothers, then maybe you if there's enough. You feel it burn, not just the ache in your belly, but the ache in your pride. You want to take, you could take, but you don't, because that would mark you not as strong, as dangerous. There's a lesson here deeper than manners. You're being shaped. Every bite you do or don't get is part of your education, a silent curriculum in self-regulation. You're not just learning to eat, you're learning how to belong. Because meat isn't just food, it's a mirror. And what you do with it reflects who you are, or who you're becoming. So you watch the others, you mimic restraint, you rehearse gratitude, you pretend you're not hungry even when your bones scream. This performance isn't deception, it's discipline. And in this world, discipline is everything. You learn that greed has a cost, not just social but spiritual. Take too much and people remember. Take it too fast and they whisper. Worse than that, they withdraw affection, trust, protection. And as a child, that's fatal. So you learn to defer, to pass the meat, even if it tears something out of you. And when your moment does come, a small piece, offered with no words, you learn to accept it with the right look. Not too eager, not too proud, just grateful. You take the bite, and with it, you absorb the unspoken rules of your people. You are being trained, not to survive alone, but to survive together. It's governance by gesture. Food becomes the earliest stage for power dynamics, not brute dominance but soft hierarchy, when to look down, when to look away, who you eat beside and who you don't. Even the rituals of pretending, of offering food to others before eating it yourself, even when you know they'll refuse, these are performances of generosity. And generosity here isn't optional, it's survival. But children aren't blank slates. Some want more, some take too soon. And when they do, the consequences are swift. Not punishment, not always, but a kind of coldness, a shamming silence. You learn that being fed isn't just about hunger, it's about behavior. And so over time, your impulses change. You learn that restraint earns trust, that sharing buys safety, that deference, while painful, places you deeper inside the group. And slowly, meat stops being about appetite. It becomes currency, a test, a signal. You start to notice who gets what and when. You start to notice why. And as your body grows, so does your understanding. You begin to see that this isn't just about food. It's about who you're becoming, not just physically, but socially. Your childhood hunger becomes the forge in which your adult identity is formed. And when you finally sit among the older youth, passing meat to the smaller ones, you feel something shift. You've made it through the early rites. You've learned how to starve with dignity, how to receive without grasping, how to give even when it hurts. This is what they wanted from you all along. To raise a person who doesn't just eat but feeds. Not recklessly, not for show, but because they understand what it means when someone smaller watches you eat. And this is how cultures preserve themselves, not just through myths or rituals, but through meals, through these quiet, repeated moments of moral training disguised as dinner. You're not just feeding children, you're forming citizens. You're shaping people who will one day hold the knife and decide who eats and who doesn't. Because one day the fire will be yours, the meat will be yours, and the children will be watching you. So you take your portion, and you remember what it felt like to wait, what it meant to be seen, what it cost to belong. And with that, the cycle continues. But what happens when the meat stops coming? When the hunt fails, and hunger threatens not just dignity but everything? That's what you face next. You stand at the edge of a world unraveling. The fire flickers weakly, the usual chorus of voices quieter than ever. The meat has run out, not just a little gone. The great hunts that once brought mammoths and reindeer are now distant memories, whispered like legends that no one fully believes. The bones that told stories of shared power lie untouched, and the cold gnaws deeper than before. You feel it in your bones, too. That hollow ache where hunger lives, sharp, unrelenting. But it's more than hunger. It's ghost hunger. The hunger for what's missing, for what once was, for trust eroded by absence. When meat vanished, everything changed. The rituals that once held your people together begin to crumble. The sacred cuts aren't set aside in smoke anymore. There's nothing to sacrifice. The fire that was a parliament becomes a tomb of silence. The delicate dance of sharing collapses into something raw and desperate. Proximity around the fire no longer signals alliance, it marks suspicion. You watch as fear twists faces once friendly. Eyes dart, measuring, calculating. Who has enough? Who took too much yesterday? Who will take what they need today? The unspoken rules that govern generosity, how much, when, to whom, are rewritten by starvation. Old pacts erode like frost under the sun. Paranoia spreads like wildfire. The slightest glance carries accusation. Whispers turn to open scorn. Alliances once forged in kindness become brittle threads threatening to snap. You see hunters returning empty-handed, but now their failures don't earn sympathy, they earn blame. And blame is dangerous in a world where survival depends on trust. Superstition intensifies. When the world offers no answers, your people reach for the unseen. Spirits once honored with sacrifice now seem wrathful, distant. The line between respect and fear blurs until every failed hunt feels like a curse, every illness a punishment. You sense how hunger distorts the mind, how despair breeds stories of vengeful ghosts, of wrathful ancestors angry at the broken balance. Violence, once rare and costly, becomes a shadow stalking the camp. When survival is stripped to its bones, the rules shift. The line between sharing and taking vanishes. Desperation overrides decorum. A stolen portion isn't just theft, it's life or death. You witness how old friendships fracture, how silent gazes become threats. The peace forged around the fire flickers and dies. But it's not just others who change. You feel the hunger creeping inside yourself, warping your thoughts. You wonder what you might do to survive, what you might take if no one's watching. The ancient social contracts unravel under the weight of empty stomachs. Still, amid the hunger and fear, you glimpse something fragile, resilience. You see some reaching deeper into the old rituals, trying to restore balance by remembering how to give without expectation. Others seek new ways, bartering skins or tools when meat is scarce. The instincts that once kept the group together flicker like embers, stubborn and slow to die. Yet you know this famine is a test like no other. The hunger doesn't just threaten bodies, it threatens the very fabric of community, the invisible threads woven through generosity, ritual, and trust. One wrong move could unravel everything. As you stare into the hollow space left by the vanished meat, you wonder, how do you rebuild when the feast has become a famine? How do you restore faith when the fire is nearly cold? The answer lies ahead, in how hunger reshaped not just survival, but the meaning of sharing itself. And so you take a tentative step forward, into the shadow of scarcity, where the next chapter of this ancient story waits. You stand at the flickering edge of a fire circle, where shadows dance on faces marked by the wear of a hard world. The hunt is over. The mammoth is no longer just flesh and bone, it is legend. Its story stretches beyond the immediate need for sustenance, weaving itself into the fabric of your people's collective memory. This is no ordinary meal. It is a story waiting to be told, a myth waiting to be born. You realize that over time, meat became more than nourishment. It became a symbol, a canvas on which your ancestors painted their values, fears, and hopes. The brutal act of hunting transformed into an epic saga, and those who wielded the spear became figures of reverence, their deeds amplified by the power of storytelling. But why? Why did your people, who once simply shared meat out of survival, begin to surround it with stories? What need did these myths fulfill, and how did they shape the delicate balance of power within the tribe? You feel the weight of these questions as you listen to the crackling fire and the murmured voices recounting the hunt. The stories are not just entertainment, they are social glue. They bind the past to the present and set rules for the future. And at the center of these stories is the chosen hunter. The chosen hunter isn't just the one who killed the mammoth. He is elevated, almost mythologized. His strength, cunning, and bravery become larger than life. The details of his triumph grow with each telling: how he stalked the beast, how he dodged death, how the spear struck true in the heart. The hunt is retold as a cosmic battle, not merely a survival act but a conquest of chaos by order. This myth-making serves a purpose deeper than pride. It justifies the unequal sharing of meat. You watch as the chosen hunter receives the prime cuts, not because he demanded them, but because the stories decree it. His sacrifice, his risk, and his skill elevate him above the rest, warranting this privilege. The myth becomes a contract, a social pact that explains who deserves what and why, and those who challenge it risk more than social censure. They risk breaking the sacred order. Yet these stories also offer a fragile peace. When the hunt is successful, jealousy simmers beneath the surface. But the myth softens envy by framing the meat as a reward for greatness, not greed. It reminds everyone that the bounty was not guaranteed, it was earned. This shared narrative maintains order in a world where scarcity looms ever close. You notice how these oral traditions grow richer with time. The mammoth becomes a spirit beast, a guardian of the land whose death is both a blessing and a tragedy. The hunter becomes a mediator between the tribe and the natural world, a conduit to the unseen forces that govern life and death. Rituals evolve around these myths, offerings, dances, and ceremonies that renew the bond between people, animals, and spirits. But myths are not static. They are living stories, reshaped to fit new needs. When the tribe faces conflict, the stories shift to emphasize unity and cooperation. When rivals threaten, the myths highlight the hunter's cunning, reminding all that survival depends on collective strength channeled through individual heroism. You begin to see that these narratives are far more than fanciful tales. They are tools, tools wielded carefully to regulate behavior, enforce social hierarchies, and preserve peace. They teach who to honor and who to follow, who to fear and who to trust. They embed the ethics of sharing deep within the tribe's identity. And yet, you feel the tension beneath the surface. Myths can both heal and divide. While they unite, they also create divisions between those who are mythologized and those who are not, between the hunters and the gathered, between the elders who tell the tales and the children who listen. Stories can justify privilege but also breed resentment. You wonder how your ancestors navigated this fragile terrain, how they balanced admiration with envy, how they maintained cohesion while elevating some above others. You realize that the invention of the meat myth was a masterstroke of social engineering, a way to channel primal urges into a system of order. This chapter of your story closes with the realization that every bite of meat was once steeped not only in flavor, but in meaning. Every shared meal was a reenactment of these myths, a performance that reinforced the invisible rules holding the tribe together. You sense that understanding these ancient narratives is key to grasping how early humans evolved not only as hunters, but as storytellers, diplomats, and architects of social complexity. And as the fire dies down, you feel the pulse of those stories still alive, echoing through time, waiting for you to carry them forward. Next, you'll explore how these meat myths influenced broader tribal identity, shaping not only who ate and when, but who became and who endured. You stand in the shadow of a dying era. The mammoth, once a titan roaming vast, frozen landscapes, falls for the last time. Its massive form collapses onto the cold earth, a final, earth-shaking event that echoes far beyond the instant of the kill. This is not just the death of an animal, it is the death of a way of life. You feel the gravity of this moment because the mammoth was more than meat. It was a cornerstone of culture, economy, and identity. Its immense flesh fed clans for days, its bones shaped tools and shelters, and its very presence commanded the rituals and hierarchies of the tribe. When the last mammoth falls, it leaves a cavernous void, a silence where there once was abundance. The disappearance of the mammoth forces you and your people to confront a new reality shaped by scarcity. The colossal hunts, the grand feasts, the elaborate sharing ceremonies, they begin to fade like mist under the morning sun. Without the mammoth's bounty, the old rules that governed meat sharing lose their power. The sacred cuts become harder to claim. The delicate diplomacy of distribution frays at the edges. You watch as the hunt shifts focus. Smaller game, the fleet-footed deer, the elusive rabbits, rise in importance. Their kills are more frequent but less monumental. With them, new rituals emerge, less grand but no less vital. These smaller hunts demand different skills and bring different politics. The social currency of meat changes. You notice how the stories told around the fire adapt. No longer about titanic battles but quick chases, cunning traps, and fleeting luck. The rise of smaller game also means the sharing codes evolve. Where once the chosen hunter's glory was tied to the size of the kill, now the group's survival depends on more frequent cooperation and more equitable sharing. The old hierarchies rooted in massive kills begin to dissolve. You sense a shift toward a more collective identity, a shared burden and a shared reward. But this transition is neither smooth nor easy. The disappearance of the mammoth disrupts established power. Those who once held status because of their role in grand hunts find their influence waning. New leaders emerge, those who excel at organizing small game hunts, those who navigate the changing alliances with skill and tact. You feel the tension in the camp as old and new ways collide, each struggling for survival. You also witness how the spiritual life of the tribe transforms. The mammoth, once a sacred beast whose death warranted elaborate ritual, is replaced by a pantheon of smaller spirits, each animal with its own story, its own place in the balance of life. These new beliefs reflect the tribe's adaptation, their way of making meaning from loss. In this fading light of the Ice Age world, You see that survival hinges not just on the animals hunted, but on the stories told, the rituals performed, and the bonds renewed. The last mammoth's fall signals an end, but also the dawn of a new chapter, one where resilience and adaptability become the greatest tools for survival. As you step away from the mammoth's still form, you carry the weight of its legacy, the lessons of abundance and scarcity, of power and humility, of life's fragile, ever-changing dance. And you prepare to walk forward into a world reshaped by absence, where every bite is a reminder of what was lost and what must be rebuilt. What comes next is not just survival, but transformation. You sit at your own table now. Maybe it's sleek and modern or worn from years of family meals. Perhaps it's bustling with chatter and clinking glasses, or quiet and reflective. But beneath the surface, beneath the polished veneer of cutlery and place settings, you feel a whisper, a pull from deep within you. It's subtle, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. The ancient code of meat, of sharing and signaling, still lives here. You wonder who gets the best cut, who serves it first, who chooses the portion size, and who accepts what's left. These aren't just innocent questions about dinner etiquette. They're echoes of a time when every bite carried the weight of survival, alliance, and power. The dance around the meal is older than civilization itself, older than kings and kingdoms, rooted in the very first sparks that flickered beside a Paleolithic fire. In that moment, you feel yourself connected to a lineage of countless ancestors who gathered around glowing embers. Their struggles, their triumphs, and their delicate social balances are etched into the unwritten rules that still govern how we eat today. The ways you offer food, the manners you observe, the subtle glances exchanged over a meal, they all trace back to rituals designed not just to feed the body, but to manage fragile human relationships. Look closer and you realize the table is more than a place for food. It's a stage for signaling loyalty, trust, and power. You still share to build alliances, whether with a business partner, a family member, or a friend. And you still withhold, whether consciously or not, to punish, to assert control, or to protect yourself. These actions aren't relics of a distant past. They are primal behaviors, refined through millennia but fundamentally unchanged. The corporate boardroom where deals are struck over catered lunches, the wedding feast where family politics simmer beneath the toasts, the Thanksgiving dinner where gratitude masks unspoken tensions. These modern settings mirror the fire circles of old. The stakes have evolved, but they remain high. Food remains a currency of trust and power. And just like your Paleolithic ancestors, you negotiate status with every bite you give or refuse, with every invitation extended or declined. The rituals may look different, but the underlying psychology remains. The way you hold a glass, the order in which you serve dishes, the pauses before you eat, they are all subtle codes, gestures in an ancient language of survival and social order. You may not wield a spear or butcher a mammoth, but the legacy of those first hunters is still woven into your DNA. Their stories, their struggles, their systems of sharing and signaling shape who you are, how you connect, compete, and cooperate. So, as you lean into your next meal, consider this. Every slice, every morsel, every offering carries a story that began tens of thousands of years ago. The fire may have moved from cave to hearth to stove, but the rhythms of hunger, generosity, envy, and diplomacy still play out across your dinner table. In that knowledge, you hold a profound connection, not just to your meal but to the vast, tangled web of human history. You carry forward a legacy of cooperation born in scarcity, of conflict averted through sharing, and of trust forged in the harshest conditions imaginable. And in this moment, you realize that the simple act of breaking bread is nothing less than a continuation of an ancient pact, a ritual as vital now as it was in the shadow of the last mammoth. Your ancestors are with you at every meal, quiet witnesses to the power of sharing, the dangers of envy, and the timeless human struggle to survive together. And so your story, too, unfolds, framed by the echoes of fires long extinguished